I like how this looks, but then again, I like how I dress, and like other people don't.
They don't. Yeah, they don't. They don't. It's the suspenders, I think, that puts people off. They're supposed to go under the blazer jacket, and yet what you're doing is
Do you
just
mean
like...
suspenders or braces? Like suspenders as in suspenders for stockings, or do you mean like braces?
Both. What you do is you use the stockings suspenders and you hoik them right up over your shoulder.
And how do you know this?
YouTube.
Right, okay. Just don't ask me to stand up today. Hi everybody and welcome to Short Fuse. I'm Duncan Roberts and I'm here with Ollie O'Donoghue. Ollie, can you say...
Hello there.
Hang on. Wait for me. Wait for me. Anyway, that's Ollie. He's getting cheerier as we go along. But we're Short Fuse. We're a podcast where we take some sort of idea, a concept, some sort of technology or other thing, and we will vote as to whether we are long or short on it, whether we believe in it or whether we don't. And then we'll have some healthy debate. Chat about it, chat some nonsense, and we will then re-vote to see if either of us have changed our mind based on that discussion. And we're going to talk about, Ollie, why don't you tell us what we're going to talk about?
Yeah, well, so I was playing a game, Duncan, the other day, yesterday in fact, called Empires of Sin, which is like a Chicago gangsters prohibition game. And this thought came across my mind. It's like, oh, this would be much harder to do today.
Play a game?
Gunning down foes.
Gunning down foes.
Gunning down foes and, extorting local businesses and all sorts of stuff like that. I thought, do you know what? With Ring doorbells, this would be much, much harder. I'd be, imprisoned relatively quickly, I'd imagine. And that got me thinking about the concept of crime and whether or not the abundance of technologies, a lot of them we've talked about in previous episodes. You think AR, AI, obviously, huge role to play. Even discrete technologies like Ring doorbells, just the prevalence of CCTV and stuff like that, and wearables and stuff tracking your every move and your internet presence, all of that stuff. Whether that makes crime harder to get away with, or all of those technologies create new opportunities.
So you're saying, can we use technology to eradicate?
I don't know that eradicating is ever going to be possible, right? So I genuinely believe there's a concept. I can't remember where it came from. There's a concept that no matter how smart you are, you'll never be as smart as kind of the sum of human intelligence out there. There's always someone that's going to do something like just either incredibly innovative or just incredibly unpredictable. And I think that's a lose-lose scenario. You'll never be able to fight. Like, so if someone wants to commit a crime, they'll still be able to do it. But whether or not the prevalence of technology makes crime harder to commit and harder to get away with. So, like in the same way that you would you might short a stock or long a stock, sometimes you're shorting a stock, not betting on it disappearing or being bankrupt, but that it'll just won't perform as well. So that's kind of the frame. And I just to make it a little bit easier, I'm going to remove organised and government-sponsored crime.
Wow.
From the equation.
Because petty crime or like...
Just day-to-day delicious crime.
But are we include... So let's get our concepts of crime down. Petty crime, burglary, theft, murder, all those other horrible things, but including like financial crime.
Yes, yeah. I think where it's an individual. So if you were to,
I'm not insinuating that murder is petty crime. By the way, I think that might have just come across. But like personal crime committed by people, and then can we cover crime committed by institutions or large groups of people? No.
Large groups, fine, just not organised crime. So actually, I would include in this, because I think this is the counterpoint. An interesting counterpoint is, if you look at some of the big corporate fraud, it's not technically organised crime. The mafia's presumably not involved with Bankman-Fried and all of those guys, but they have used technology to get away with quite a significant fraud.
Yeah.
So far from making it harder to catch them. They got away with it for an extended period of time.
Yeah.
But then here's another interesting counterpoint. The second that the authorities became aware of it, they were then able to use all of that technology to be like, "Whoa, hang on, we've caught this guy back to rights."
Okay. Right. So I have much to say on this, but we need to vote because our voting, we're a bit like a kind of a UK panel show where we say we're going to vote, and then we either forget to vote or we kind of do a very flimsy kind of, well, I'm short on it, but only in these circumstances.
We're just here for the chatter. There's no point in this.
So tell me, are you long or short on crime?
Short. I believe my instinct whilst playing that gangster game is that it would be much harder to.
Good, because I'm very long. I'm very long on crime. Not
what a
like
disgraceful thing to say.
not like
nasty man.
Not like because I want to.
I'm investing now in crime.
Not because I want to be a criminal or that I'm actively backing it, but that I cannot. I think that it's a similar conversation to the jobs conversation, right? Where people say, this technology is going to wipe out this job or automate this job. This technology is going to wipe out the ability not just to do this crime or to get away with this crime. People would just find new things to do, and I think that's absolutely the case when it comes to new technologies, especially today. And it also depends again on your definition of crime. But I could go through a lot of things that I think are criminal to do with technology at the moment, but are not necessarily prosecutable in a court of law.
Well, let's stick to a traditional handful of crimes then, because I think you were right. So like theft, burglary, murder, a bit of fraud. Let's throw some fraud in there. Why
I
not?
think we should definitely throw fraud in there because I want to talk about it. I want to talk about it.
Well, look, here's my justification for my short.
Okay,
right? There are three areas that have me pondering this quite deeply. That makes me think it'd be harder to get away with a wide bucket of crimes. The first one is cameras, wearables, and mobile phones absolutely everywhere. So just the sheer amount of data that I have. I've got a smartwatch. I've got a phone. There's Ring doorbells. Actually, I have a lot of cameras around my house.
Creepy.
That's why I paused.
Where are they?
They're all facing out. They're all protecting my property rather than scrutinizing its occupants. I don't know. But like that makes me think like, hey, if I were to go out and commit a crime, it would be quite easy to prove it was me. Right, and obviously, there is I'd take the smartwatch off or whatever, but I think all of that data, all of those signals, would make it quite easy to narrow it down to be me, including their absence. So if for example, you're able to scrutinize all of my daily activities, and I'm wearing a smartwatch, and then a murder happened where I'm clearly in the proximity, but I don't happen to have my phone or my smartwatch or anything like that, and all my Ring doorbells are switched off, then suspicious, and
I guess there's a difference, isn't there, between committing the crime and getting away with it again, because all that information collected by those various devices, it depends whether they're public or private devices. If they're private devices, then obviously you have to try and go to that private company that has that data to get it out of them, and we know the issues that people have had, like trying to get data out of Apple or Facebook or Meta or Google based on mobile phone transcripts, and encryption is a big deal in WhatsApp and Telegram and Signal and things like that. And they arrested the CEO of Signal in France, didn't they? Not Signal, sorry, Telegram in France, because he was kind of party to all the. They're assuming that he's party to all of the crimes that happen on those devices, and they can't track those people, so they just arrest the person who is, in inverted commas, enabling those crimes. So yeah, I get it. I get it, but still, that getting access to that data is not an easy. It's not just freely available for law enforcement to use. So it doesn't stop the crime getting committed, but it might make it harder to get away with depending on the devices that are accessed.
I think a lot of what I'm going to describe actually is just making sure the person's caught. I guess, because do you know there actually isn't a huge amount of technology can do unless we end up in a Minority Report scenario. And there are some people that are talking about that potentially being the case just by the way advanced AI can model human behaviors and be like, hey, this guy's about to commit a murder or something like that. And there's a huge amount of ethics. But what I'm really talking about is the deterrent effect of like, if I do this, I'm almost certainly going to be caught because.
So you're not necessarily going to stop a crime of passion that happens, not instinctively is not the word, but spontaneously. But you might reduce premeditated crime through the use of technology to kind of deter it.
It's very hard to stop a crime of passion by its nature. But you've touched on a couple of interesting points, which is it links to my second one, which is AI, the increasing use of AI in criminal investigations. So there are now a ton of cold cases that are being closed because of AI's involvement coming through vast quantities of data, just huge amounts of data. And one of them, which is absolutely fascinating, is genealogical databases.
Yeah.
So I can't remember the exact example, but one person left their DNA on a coffee cup. It didn't match the police database. But then they went to genealogical, the websites that you would use to find long lost relatives and stuff like that, which has vast amounts of DNA because people send it in, and it was able to match that DNA to a relative of this person and completely narrow it down. Really interesting point that you made is that a lot of these genealogical websites now have added a clause that is, we will not share your data with law enforcement agencies unless you tick this box.
Yeah,
right? Because it became a problem. Because
like
it's
the
so
DNA, I'm finding out whether I've got any of this particular heritage in my DNA. I'm going to do this DNA test. I've committed a murder and I'm caught by my DNA that I self-submitted.
It's unlikely that you would, because that would be, you deserve to be caught. For multiple reasons.
I'm talking specifically. I wouldn't expect these things to happen at the same time. Like I'm committing a murder while doing my mouth swab for 23andMe.
And yet, but what's likely to happen, however, is that's unlikely to happen. One would hope for any criminals listening, do that. So you'll be caught. But also, don't. It's really stupid. But a relative of yours doing it innocently, they haven't committed any murders. They're just doing it because they want to find their long lost cousin or great aunt. And the authorities being able to track that person down and be like, right, so it's one of your direct relatives. We know that. We know it's one of your direct relatives.
Do you think that could... So there's another really interesting point there around kind of like miscarriages of justice. Because if they know it's one of your direct relatives, and say, for instance, one of your direct relatives is a troubled person, has had a troubled history, they're more likely to go for that person. But actually, it's the squeaky clean person, brother or sister or whatever. There's the potential for like miscarriage of justice based on that data as well. Like in every British crime TV show, right? Yeah.
And it's true.
Person, but it's actually the other one.
Yeah. Well, there are. I mean, obviously, there are huge ethical issues. So there's loads. There are some of the biggest companies that do this work. I can't remember the exact one. And they do all sorts, right? So they can create an image, like the old cartoon drawings, not cartoon drawings, but the police sketches, right? Someone stolen my handbag, and you would describe the ruffian that did it, which always just felt bizarre to me. But in most cases, they did look strikingly similar.
I could not do, like, if I was to try and describe you and do a like a police sketch of you. Well, what would you end up looking like? We'll have to try that one day.
It would be monstrous, wouldn't it?
I'll tell you what we'll do. For the cover for this episode of the podcast, I'm going to try and describe you to a generative AI tool, and then we're going to put that as your portrait on the cover of this podcast.
Done. I accept.
Okay.
Behind bars where I belong.
Yeah, we're wanted. Yeah.
But anyway, back to this AI software. It can create incredibly likely images and age them and do things like one of the things you can do to try and get away with a crime is grow a beard, or shave it off, right? So or gain loads of weight or lose loads of weight.
Yeah.
And this software can simulate that too.
Yeah.
Right. And kind of create an image on what it looks. And obviously,
much
I think
more accurately than you would have been able to do in the past.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And the same for aging and things like that. And there are examples where, children or people who've been missing for a long period of time have been found 10 years later because a picture has been circulated of what they look like, 10 years older. And people are like, oh, this person lives down the road from me. So that's number two that makes me think like, it's going to be tougher to get away with, right? Just the way you can apply these technologies. And like I say, there are some amazing cold cases that have now been solved off the back of combing through vast, you think how big that genealogical database is, if millions and millions of people are using it, and it can scan through it. The final one, before you tell me why you love crime so much, the final one is, the kind of the Sherlock moment, or the any detective when they walk into a room and they're just kind of noticing stuff, right? And they're like, it's always a tiny detail.
Yeah.
That at the end of the episode, they're like, how did you know it was them, Doctor? And they're like, there's a cigarette in the corner and this person smokes and no one else smokes. That type of thing.
Yeah. You had the residue on your finger or whatever.
Yeah. Or like you could only walk through the door this way and they were clearly hiding behind the door and everything. Imagine augmented mixed reality.
Yeah.
VR headsets,
like looking like the Terminator, like
right?
Yeah,
exactly.
Why do I always make that noise when that's
we'll
technology
never know.
Noise?
We'll never know. We'll never know. But it should really become the theme tune for this podcast. But no, imagine that where an officer, a detective, can have a variety of different data sources beamed into that. So things like time of day. So it simulates what the time of day would look like, what the lighting would look like if, hey, we think this robbery happened at midnight, blah, blah, blah. Or we think the person came through this way. Is that possible? Simulating the potential size of the person. I find that kind of ability where someone like me could become Sherlock, augmented by technology, absolutely fascinating. Yeah. Because that is our kind of popular cultural idea of what a detective does. And they do a lot of other stuff, by the way. I believe. I don't know.
It's like, going back to the games analogy, it's like in a lot of games these days, you have like detective vision, or that kind of vision. You press a button and it highlights the important things in the room.
You can hear everything around you.
And you can see enemies through walls and stuff like that. So I guess, is that what you're saying? Like, and you can simulate being 6'7" instead of 4'6", and see what it's like from that angle.
It's that simulation aspect that I think means you could have an ongoing investigation which captures pieces of evidence that are perhaps time sensitive, and you can store them in a digital environment.
So you could, for example, one of the interesting things at the moment that I'm kind of playing around with at the moment is Gaussian splatting, which is the ability to create a photogrammetry of an environment. You're smiling because it's called Gaussian splatting.
That's the cold open for this podcast. We should keep this conversation going as it is now untouched, but that should just you saying Gaussian splatting should be the cold open.
Gaussian splatting because it splats these things onto a kind of a depth map of an area, but it can basically create quite accurate and photorealistic environments through a phone scan. Through pictures that you take with your phone, and I guess you could, like you say, time sensitive. You could take a scan of a room post crime scene and then have that preserved. It might already be happening at the moment. I'm not very up on my kind of forensics, but you could take a scan of a room and then have it there on file as a digital twin of a crime scene to investigate things that may have been missed or cleaned up post event.
Exactly. You think about contamination of evidence, etc. And how many times, either through appeals, for example, someone who's been accused of it that says, "No, I'm innocent," and there are a lot of appeals that are overturned, or again, cold cases that just need to be continuously investigated new data and information comes about, being able to go into that almost digital twin of the crime scene that is untouched and time preserved would be incredibly powerful. Incredibly powerful. But also, like I say, just the real time, as as the crime is happening or has happened in a recent time period, being able to go in and almost query the environment and be like, right, what was the weather like? Visualize the weather. Like how noisy would it have been? Can we simulate rain? Would you have heard someone breaking a window if a train was going past at the same time, which according to our data it was? That type of stuff I just think would be an incredibly powerful way of investigating and prodding and experimenting with different.
So then you've got like an application for, and we talked about this on another episode, like the convergence of generative AI and the, in inverted commas, metaverse. Like where you have that digital twin, you go and you can query it by asking those questions in kind of natural detective language. I do feel like we've got our vision of detectives. It's like people in Deer Stalkers with a big magnifying glass, like making their eye really big. But yeah, I can absolutely see that. My biggest challenge to that, I guess, is that the crims, the perpetrators will have access to this technology as well and will leverage it to not necessarily commit crimes. And, we are talking about a certain amount of organization here and premeditation, but it will enable crimes as well as help solve them. So, let's take the obvious, probably elephant in the room, or at least it is for me, which is crypto. The ability to kind of launder money anonymously is a massive problem with crypto. The whole NFTs scams, the crypto queen disappearing, that it created a massive problem. The Sam Bankman-Fried is it?
I can never get it right.
Yeah.
I can never get it right.
SBF. It was because it was an exchange, right? And they did find it eventually, but it was an exchange rather than a kind of a pure crypto play. But like ultimately, in a lot of ways, this stuff is anonymous and you can't trace it. So people can use it to scam people. And what I was alluding to at the beginning, some of those businesses were not necessarily illegal, but in my mind, they were still criminal.
Sure.
In the actions that they were, the kind of things that they were doing with that technology. And the same goes for like VR and AR. Like it's not necessarily leveraging that technology for crime itself. It's like committing crimes in the metaverse, like even just harassment or abuse using
so
those.
It becomes a channel for crime.
It kind of becomes a channel for that crime. And it's not always the most obvious one. It might be quite difficult. And I'm sure there's various different things that can happen using those technologies. There was an interesting one the other day that Meta's, not Meta's AR glasses, the Project Orion that we spoke about, but they're Ray-Bans that have the cameras in them. They're not AR glasses. They are a kind of a pathway to consumer AR wear. But some students had created something so that the cameras within them would take a picture of random people's faces in the street and essentially dox them in real time, because it would use a facial recognition search engine that's publicly available called PimEyes, and they could just basically get where that person lives, their interests from social media in real time as they're walking down the street. Now, that has massive implications for kind of harassment, stalking, that kind of stuff, and exposing that data. And you could kind of, I could meet you as a random person on the street and really creep you out by going, Ollie, you like the Roman Empire and playing organized crime games, and you would be
publicly accessible information.
yeah,
not a problem.
But the ability to do that's terrifying.
It is terrifying. Yeah, I can imagine if you're a victim of stalking. Just what you're describing now is a hellscape, really.
Yeah, and this technology's again only it can happen now, and it's only going to get more invasive as you're able to not just kind of record that person, but then visualize as you're looking at them some of that data that you can use against them. So guarding yourself against that, and again, you can use technology to guard against that, and it's this constant battle: technology versus crime versus technology versus crime. Playing whack-a-mole with these things, and then AI, of course, like kind of what's the word I'm looking for? I've completely forgotten the impersonation, right. Fake news, phone scams. You can use AI to combat against it, and you can. But then the scammers, the resourcefulness of these people will kind of push that back, and then etc. So I do get it. I think that technology will act as a deterrent, but having it available, and technology is becoming more freely available, right, and easier to use.
Is the barriers to entry for
the barriers to entry are going down, and as you get these models that are like AI models that are open source and publicly available, you can download, you can run them locally, you could set up your own. We talk about like people setting up one-person billion-dollar businesses. What if that's a one-person billion-dollar crime syndicate that they're setting up? Like a bot farm or a scam farm that one person's just set up from their bedroom, which they're already doing. But like the ability for technology to put a megaphone to that and then expand that is phenomenal and terrifying. And I think we're only really scraping the tip of the iceberg with what we're talking about that's possible, because people are resourceful, and if they want to commit a crime, they will, or they want money, or they want to hurt someone, they will find a way to leverage technology to do that.
I think that's right, and that's the kind of the mass intelligence of everyone out there. Like your point, if they want to commit a crime, people figure a way of doing it, and it's whether or not the crime is also worth investigating to an extent. And the reason I say that is if you think about the early days, not even the early days actually, the internet was still quite mature. Piracy was rampant. Yeah. I can remember. I never did it because obviously I'm a good boy.
Of course.
Let's say for a second that I did.
Hypothetically,
yeah. Downloaded
Ollie O'Donoghue
series 4
of Maidstone.
Yeah. Well, no, I think. Oh no, we don't have limitations in the UK. They could still come for me.
Yeah.
But let's say I downloaded Lost Series 4, which I definitely didn't. And I was really worried that
itself, mate.
No, it isn't. It's a cracking series. The younger generations, it's now on Netflix. The younger generations are now watching Lost and are going like, "Hey, this is okay, actually."
I just got confused. Anyway, that's a different conversation. Carry on.
But I take that quite seriously because obviously, anytime you watched anything, it did that thing, with the kind of the bassy rock music. That's
you wouldn't download a car. You wouldn't download
exactly.
a car. Well, you can't download. Yeah. I don't even know if it said that.
You wouldn't steal a car. I think was there. You
I'd try and download.
So why are you stealing a film? Yeah.
Why were you stealing a very highly regarded TV series, Ollie?
Well, I wasn't, of course, but let's say that I was.
Right.
I took those messages quite seriously because you know how my mind works. So I was like, great, so the police are going to knock on my door, and I shouldn't have done this. And then I kind of went to school and spoke to a few. Turned out everyone in school was doing it.
Yeah,
literally. Like, so I went to a relatively big school. Everyone, literally without fail, good kids, bad kids, everyone was just doing it because they were like, well, nothing happens. And they were sort of right. Nothing did happen. When you look back, I think there were a few big cases where the authorities were just like, we're going to go after one or two people and get them with big fines. But eventually it just became civil. It didn't even become criminal anymore. So the big production companies were taking individuals to court.
Well, that's where it becomes interesting, right? Because then it becomes who's the perpetrator or the enabler of the crime. And much like we spoke about with the Telegram CEO, people started like it wasn't the individual pirates that were being prosecuted. It was the Pirate Bay. It was, the people who enabled it. So as technology becomes more prevalent and used in crime, are they going to charge, Meta? Are they going to charge Google for use of their open source models to commit crime? I don't know.
And there are, it's one of the things you mentioned, right? It's this facial recognition company that's freely available. I'm sure it has many legitimate aims. Doesn't feel great though, when the way you've just described it.
Doesn't feel great.
Doesn't feel great at all. So there's a part of me, and you're right. Going after one target is often way easier than millions of little targets that are going to hide away. So people continue to commit those little crimes, but people harassing someone in the metaverse, my hunch is that because that's bound in technological infrastructure, is that for most people, it's going to be quite hard to catch, quite easy to catch them. So there'll be some that'll be really hard. They'll have all sorts of clever ways of obscuring themselves. But your common or garden creep who turns up into the metaverse to be a creep, I imagine you'll be like, right, well, we literally know where you live,
and we
have
can
all of your information,
your device, and stop you from doing it.
We can stop you from doing it, and also report you to the authorities immediately.
Yeah.
It's the trickier, smarter customers where you would have to go after the platform and say to the host of the metaverse, let's say, I'm no doubt getting all the terminology wrong, but the host of the metaverse say, like, look, this is rampant here, and you are not catching these people because you're enabling them to come in.
So VR chat, I think, has a problem with kind of child exploitation, essentially. And there was a report recently of children going onto VR chat and then being kind of essentially groomed through that platform. The whole metaverse thing is a very similar situation to kind of social media, but that much more visceral because of the technology and that much more impactful, as if kind of social media abuse wasn't kind of impactful enough or troublesome enough.
I can remember the first time, because much like our entire friendship and colleagueship has really been based on you being sort of an optimist and me being a cynic, and me doing the whataboutery about literally everything you ever talk about. And in the early days, you were a big proponent of the metaverse, with quite a few caveats.
The technology, not the way.
Sure. And then there was an article, I can't remember which environment it was, maybe we shouldn't say, but it was a journalist went on to each one and calculated the mean time to being sent sexually explicit material. And I think the average time was something like 1 minute and 13 seconds. It was incredibly long. I can remember sending you that article and being like, see, the metaverse isn't all it's cracked up to be. But like, it is absolutely astonishing. This was just a journalist that turned up as a digital being, and it was an incredibly short amount of time. I'll try and find the exact number. But again, presumably it'd be quite easy to catch those people and say, like, what's going on? And even now, this is where AI comes in again. I was reading a really interesting article where different authorities are using advanced forms of AI, new forms of AI, to model grooming activities, which is obviously massive in social media, massive in a wide variety of environments, obviously a huge issue that needs to be solved. But they were using AI to kind of go, okay, well people who do this, and this kind of tend to do this bad thing, and we should keep an eye on it. Which sounds really dystopian, but because most of that activity is just taking place on the internet, on Facebook, in a normal environment, that data exists and it's easy to track in a way that isn't too invasive until you need to step in and be like, no, this is, someone's at risk here, someone's in danger here. And again, that to me, there's kind of an ethical challenge there, again, where you go too far into Minority Report and it becomes
it's kind of like a privacy and data security question around it, and civil liberties, and I don't know.
It's right. So it's an intentionally difficult example because you can't you struggle. I know what you're saying, but you struggle to take the counterpoint, which is, well, I should be allowed to do what I want, Which and that's not, I don't mean it. I don't mean it as kind of flippantly as that. But that's the counterpoint. It's like, hey, the internet is the internet, and I may not have done those bad things. I may have just done these things which are relatively pointless tasks that your algorithm is now saying leads to that, and I'm telling you it doesn't lead to that.
I'm like downloading Series 4 of Lost because I'm confused by what the smoke monster is, and now I'm being had up for kind of international fraud. You know,
exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's a more palatable example, actually. but you know, and like I said, I didn't download Series 4 of Lost, so I'd never do a crime.
Yeah, right. You never do a crime. No, I'm not a criminal. Like, well, but I am.
But you are pro-crime.
I'm not pro. I'm long on crime. We've got Moriarty has nothing on me, and Sherlock has nothing on you, with your AR glasses on.
Yeah,
but
that's true.
Right, okay. Have I convinced you that to be long on crime, or are you still short on it?
No, I'm still really short, because I think if you look at the type of crime that you're talking about, which I agree is going to become worse, I think that's quite a small segment of criminal activity. I think that's quite a small number of actors that are doing those bad things. And I agree, you're not going to be able to outsmart them. But I think a wide body of crime is opportunistic or relatively thoughtless. And I think a lot of these technologies can, if not stop the activity, because I don't think that's possible in a lot of places, but can make it really clear you're just not going to get away with it.
Yeah.
And like I say, for me, the big kind of lighthouse stuff is these cold cases. And I can't remember the exact name, but there's a serial killer in America, right? Serial killer in America that's been unfounded. Like, kind of part of the mystique of this serial killer was just like nobody knew who it is, and by using a variety of different techniques, including modern technologies, they've eventually found out who it is, and the person was just like, "Yeah, it was me." It's quite a well-known case. I just can't remember what it's called.
I would have got away with it if it weren't for that pesky AI.
That pesky AI got me. And that just makes things like the more stories like that come out, where it's like, hey, the tools that are available to the police now and law enforcement agencies now are so good that you shouldn't commit crime. And I think that would impact a lot of people in the same way that kind of early innovations like fingerprinting and DNA. Now, crime didn't stop. It took on a variety of different flavors and forms. But it did make it quite clear that, look, if you do something stupid and you leave fingerprints all over the place, you're going to get caught. You're going to get caught or leave DNA everywhere. And actually, this is a last point in this long, rambling closing speech is... New forms of technology are helping us do better things with pre-existing technologies.
Yeah.
So the amount of DNA you now need to be able to come up with a conclusion that's like, no, it's this person, or it's statistically likely to be this person, or whatever it is that takes place, is now much, much smaller than it ever needed to be. You need to get quite a lot of DNA, in fact, to be able to do that. Now it's relatively small. And even you can use AI to model the type of bullet that would be in a gun to an extraordinary level of detail to know to know which gun it came from. And before you'd be like, hey, it's a 9mm bullet and this is a 9mm gun, so that seems like it adds up. But there are a lot of 9mm guns and a lot of 9mm bullets, whereas now you can scan the bullet and how kind of the mechanics of the bullet on impact have been shaped and altered by the gun and by how it was shot. Which makes it much easier to figure out who pulled the trigger and who had the gun. And I just think all of those factors combined means it'll be much harder for a huge chunk of criminals to get away with it.
Okay. I take your point, but you haven't convinced me that the opportunistic kind of crimes that you're describing won't necessarily just move to another place. So maybe that the crimes that I'm talking about are less prevalent at the moment, but I think that they will increase. But you know what? I don't know much about crime because I'm a good, upstanding citizen who never downloaded anything illegal in his life. So I'm still long on crime, but I don't commit any like you.
And you think it would just take different, like Richard Osman, if you're listening, anyone who doesn't know Richard Osman is, I'm surprised why you're listening to us, actually. He's incredibly famous. But Murder in the Metaverse, there you go. That's a new book.
Yeah,
Royalties in this direction.
Yeah. When you die in the metaverse, you die in real life. That's Sword Art.
You
Online.
took it. You took it to a dark place, man. I brought Richard Osman in. I brought a fun title in. Got people thinking. Then you just immediately pulled it back down again.
Death.
Yeah,
death.
Yeah, that's right.
All right. Okay. So we haven't convinced each other, but hopefully it's an interesting conversation and an important one, I think. And it will be interesting to see how this moves forward and if any new technologies give rise to any more types of crime prevention or the ability to commit crime. But thank you for listening. Say bye-bye, Ollie.
Goodbye.
That's kind of you. See you later, everyone.